Hey, this is Johnnie Holes, and this is out of character. This is kind of an experiment. I'm not really quite sure if I'm gonna do a bunch of these. It all depends on you guys whether or not you think it's listenable or whatever. Um, what I thought would be interesting would be to do a show that discusses something that's unpleasant to all of us, and I know that many people in our community deal with it, and that's depression. um it's not a fun thing. It sucks, but I've had over 20 something years of experience, in the sense of I've been in and out of hospitals, and I've seen more doctors than you could possibly imagine for what I was diagnosed with. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, um, manic depression, and panic disorder, and most recently, a couple of years ago, PTSD, um, because I because of me getting shot, basically. Um, I'm not really here just to give advice, but just more so to just say, hey, you know what? You're not alone. And maybe a few people can relate to these stories. Maybe you guys might be able to do something with them and use it as some kind of a tool or something. I'm not sure. I'm not narcissistic. Hopefully, it doesn't come off that way. I'm very self-conscious about ego. I'm not a big fan of it. So I'd rather just be sort of just myself and just tell you, what it was like dealing, what it's been like. I mean, because I deal with it every day. I mean, I'm not going to hide it. It's uh, it's just something that I think is really important, and I've noticed a lot of us in this community suffer with it. And it's good to know that there's other people out there, and maybe our stories are similar, or maybe there's just something you've been thinking about, and hopefully this show I'll be able to cover that area. I guess it's best to start with the day that I decided, this is it. I'm going to see a doctor, and I'll never forget it. I was sitting in a movie theater. We were seeing that movie Cable Guy with what's his name, Jim Carrey and Ben Stiller. Um, and I'm sitting in the middle of the theater, and I never feel comfortable in the middle of the theater. I always have anxiety attacks, but it was a crowded theater, so we couldn't find any other seats. So I'm in the middle of it, and because I usually like to sit at the end, and I'm watching the movie, and I'm eating a Jordan almond. I'll never forget this. And suddenly, I have this unbearable panic attack that, in all honesty, felt like a heart attack. I mean, it was probably the worst panic attack I had ever had in my entire life. I'm sitting next to my friend, and I literally want to grab his leg and squeeze it for dear life because my heart is pounding out of my chest. I'm dizzy. I feel I've got like that pins and needles feeling, trying to catch my breath, and it's in the middle of a movie theater, and I want to get up, I want to leave, but I can't, and I don't know how long it lasts. It felt like it lasted forever, but I sat there, I grinned and bear it, and by the time the movie ended, I remember leaving, and I was a smoker at the time. I smoked cigarettes, so I lit a cigarette, and I was like, "That's it. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. I've had enough." So I basically just got all my stuff together and went to this place, Northern Boulevard in Flushing, and I found a really sweet, amazing doctor. I don't remember her name, but she was very understanding. I explained to her everything because I didn't know what it was that was happening to me. I didn't know. I had no idea that there was medications for these issues. I didn't know. So she said, "Look, it sounds like you had an anxiety attack. Um, it sounds like you might be coping with a lot of emotional issues." She goes, "Why don't you go to this place?" And she gave me the name on a business card. and she wrapped up like 4 pills. And to this day, I don't remember what they were. They were like 4 or 5 small pills that she just kind of wrapped up in like tissue paper. And she gave them to me, which has never happened to before in the history of the doctor's appointments. A doctor's never just handed me pills like that. But she just kind of wrapped it up, and they were these white pills. And she told me what they were, but I honestly don't remember what they were anymore. Um, she said they were like for anxiety or something. And I held them on for like dear life. I was holding on to them. So I left and I made the appointment. It was like, I don't know. It was a few weeks after. I remember I was going on vacation to Lake George with my friends, so I was going to be coming back, and the appointment was when I came back. And so finally, when I got back, and I remember having the worst anxiety attacks while everyone is sleeping. You know, we rented this really nice cabin in the middle of the woods when we were on vacation with my friends, and I was just so anxious the whole time. I was just having these I just could not relax. And I could not take the anxiety anymore. It was just taking over my life. I mean, there would be moments where I was asked if I'd like to go see a concert, and I would say no because I can't handle the crowds. There were so many opportunities that I had passed up. In fact, my friend had bought me tickets to go see the Sex Pistols. They had gotten back together. I had this reunion tour going on, and it was '96, I think. And she bought me a ticket. She's like, "We're going." I was like, "I can't go." I felt terrible. You know, she was so sweet enough to think of me to buy these concert tickets, and I had to say no because I was afraid because I was going to have a panic attack. I just didn't think that was, I still feel bad about that. I mean, it was 22 years ago, but it still bothers me to this day. I still think about that. And there were job opportunities. I could have been working for like MTV, or I could have done like films. I'm not bullshitting. This is all true. And all of this I just didn't do. I was offered a role in a movie, actually. One of the Toxic Avenger movies. They were just looking for extras, and they called me up, and they offered me to come down there and to dress up, and then pretty much it almost sounded like I was guaranteed to be in the flick, and I didn't go because I was afraid to go to the city, Manhattan, when I used to live in New York. I mean, it's stuff like that. I mean, there was auditions for oh my god, there were so many auditions I didn't do just because of fear. And I would do a play maybe every 3 years or something. I would go on auditions, but it wasn't anything spectacular. It was in a church or something like that. And yeah, my dream is just completely screwed up because my life was completely controlled by fear and anxiety. And when you have that, I mean, you have to also realize in yourself that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. That there's something in your brain that's going on, and it's not wired properly. And it's not your fault. It's just how your brain's wired, and it's gonna make things difficult. So you have that thing called flight or fight, where some people are able to fight it. And after being dealing with anxiety for over 20 years and being on every medication you can imagine. Unfortunately, I'm really not taking any medication for it now. They won't give it to me. It's a long story. I'll go into that if we have another episode of this. But um, there are psychological things I've learned to teach myself that maybe I'll go over in another show, like things that I do in my head to sort of just get myself through the rough spots. I mean, the one thing is, I think about is where my safety place is, and my safety place is my bedroom in my messy apartment. Um, I feel safe there. So if I'm out somewhere, I will think about my room in my apartment to calm myself down because it's my safety place. I think about, okay, well, this is think about the bed. I'll think about silly things, the bed, the cat, anything that makes me feel comfortable. I automatically go to that when I'm in the midst of a really nasty anxiety attack. And the other thing that I do make myself remember is that, hey, look, you're not going to die. Nobody's ever died from an anxiety attack. You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You just have to breathe properly. Just relax. You're okay. You're in a safe spot. I always usually shut myself down if I'm public, then I go somewhere to make sure that I'm alone. Like if it's, I remember like if I would do a play, I would get very anxious before I got on stage, very incredibly anxious. So I would just get really, really quiet and I would avoid everybody and I would just sit alone. And which was, that was also kind of like my process of acting or whatever. I know that sounds arrogant, but that was, how I did it. And I got myself through it. Um, so after 20 years of just, dealing with there are tricks that you learn for yourself. I mean, there's a million books out there, and you've got the kooky ones, and I avoid the ones that are anti anything because they just put more poison in your head. Like the anti psychiatry books, most of them written by Scientologists. It's all a load of bullshit. Psychology does exist. It's not a poisonous science. There's people out there to help you, and ironically, psychology is based on the science that it is against. So most of their um, whatever it is, cures or studies are based on science, are Freudian basically examples. So it's all bullshit. Stay away from that. Stay away from cults, man. But anyway, um, I remember going finally to that doctor for the first time, and I had basically what was like an interview, and I sat in this room, and there were like these three people there, and these two women, and this one male psychologist, and they're all asking me all these questions. One of my favorite questions was, "Do you think that television speaks to you?" I always loved that question, but I understood why eventually. I mean, I thought it was silly, but um, and when they finally, assessed me, and I was there for a good hour, and I didn't have insurance at the time, so it was very expensive, but I just didn't care. I had to just take care of this problem. So I had the assessment, and after a short period of time, they gave me a psychiatrist who was pretty good, and she was this English woman. First, I had this Indian woman, and then I was placed in with this English woman, English British accent, Dr. Hughes. I remember her name. She spoke, very properly, and she was very kind. She was very polite. She would tell me, one of the theories about me was she thought that I was super sensitive to medications. She's like, some people are super sensitive, and you might be one of them because she would, when you do go through the process of getting help and you do decide to go with medication, and look, I don't think going with medication is a bad thing. I know there's people out there that don't believe in it. Don't let other people's belief systems control your own. If you think that it might be good for you, try it. It's not going to kill you. It hasn't killed anybody. Well, I mean, I know there has been some issues. Scratch that last one that I just said. I mean, yeah, of course there have been some issues, but it's there to help you. And the secret to medication is you have to work with it. And by that, you just need to just apply the stuff that you're learning on your own to deal with these issues and kind of make it and amalgamate it with your medication. Just so that takes time, and it could take up to 6 to 8 weeks for some of these drugs to even work. Um, so you need to be incredibly patient. there are some side effects that you should just be like, okay, I'll be, tolerable of, and there's some, of course, that you don't want. There is impotence that's popular in the wonderful psychiatric community. Of course, nobody wants that. Um, your sex drive can get a little weird. There are medications that'll enhance it, and not by choice. It's just one of the weird side effects. I know that if I take a drug called bupropion, which is known as Wellbutrin, it makes me incredibly, unbelievably horny. Like I don't know why, it just does. It's a really weird medicine, so I can't take that. So, but I mean, there are weird side effects, and in my personal opinion, I need the medication, and I don't really think it's. I tolerate some of the stuff. Like if I've had the impotence issue, not to get personal, but I have, and honestly, we just figured out a way to augment it, and it went away. So that was cool. You know, but I went to see Doctor Hughes for about a year, and I was finally found a job. I became assistant manager of a toy store. I was working for KB Toys, which is now defunct, and I the job in essence, I got lucky for the first time because I had a great boss. My boss and I got along famously. It was awesome. We were like good friends, and also the other manager I was good friends with. Um, we would do things together, like go to Atlantic City or hang out. We'd have dinner. We would do stuff like that, and it's so awesome to have a job like that where you just like the people you work with. I mean, there were a couple of people there that I could have done without, but in essence, it was great. It was a great working environment. I mean, yeah, I was working in a wealthy area. Working in rich neighborhoods is a fucking pain in the ass. I got to tell you, rich people suck. They're just look. I'm not jealous of them. Really, I'm not. But be nice. If you have a lot of money, just be a decent person. Don't be an asshole. And man, rich people, holy fuck. They think you owe them everything with their fucking attitudes. They could come in there to buy something that's $3 and they'll act like you owe them. So that's my theory on rich people. But anyway, I'm working the job and I'm enjoying it, as you do, or as I can. And I start to begin having this really awful back problem. And I don't know what's going on with my back, but the pain is just becoming unbearable. And I'm a fat guy, so obviously that's one of the issues. And I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with the pain. I remember going and buying boxes and boxes of Doan's pills, which was a back medicine, and I just taking them. They didn't really do much, or just taking Advils. I wasn't taking any painkillers. I remember going to the doctor, and the doctor just thinking that that's what I was looking for, and I'm like, "Look, dude, I'm just in a great, unbearable amount of pain. Can you please, do something?" So finally, the straw that broke the camel's back was I'm what was it? It was I don't know. It was shortly after Christmas, and I'm standing in the back room, and I'm putting away returns. I'm getting them together, and suddenly my back just goes, fuck you, and the pain was just so unbearable. The other manager came in the back and he saw me there and he's like, "What's the matter?" He could see my face. I was supposed to work a double shift that night. And I was like, "Dude," I'm like, "I can't move." I was like, I'm in so much pain right now. I need to go. He's like, "Dude," he's like, "Don't worry about it." He's like, "I'll cover your shift." He's like, see what you could do. And my mom was alive at the time. So I called my mom and she came to pick me up and they took my car. And about 3 days later, I became extremely suicidal. I wanted to kill myself. And I sat in the kitchen with my parents and I told them I really need to go to the hospital. Um, I, I need help. And we talked about this for 3 hours. And they were like, no. They're like, you don't want to go to the hospital. They're like, you can deal with it. Just talk to your doctor. You can handle it. What's the hospital going to do for you? I said, I don't know, but I just don't feel right. I said, I feel very suicidal. I just don't feel right. And I think I was 26 at the time when this happened, or 23 or something. So we spoke, we went around in circles. And at the time, I was leaving messages on my psychiatrist's answering machine, her voicemail. This is before cell phones. So I'm just calling and leaving these messages that are just going on and on. I'm just talking on and babbling and just saying, "Hey, I'm going to do it. I can't take it anymore," etc., etc. So what happens is a couple of hours later, it's nighttime. I'm in my underwear. A police car, fire engine, and an ambulance suddenly appeared. I was living at my parents' house at the time. They suddenly appear at my dad's house right in front, and they're there waiting for me. They just show up. I had no warning. I had no idea. I didn't call the cops. My doctor did because she didn't like the messages I was leaving on her voicemail. No warning, nothing. So the EMT guys come in and they ask me, they just kind of look at me like, do you want to go? And in essence, I really didn't have a choice. I had to. I just said yes. So, my father and I sat in the back of the ambulance. I'll never forget this. It was so awkward. My father's hands are folded, he's kind of looking down, and I'm kind of worried, but in a really weird sort of way. I'm also kind of relieved because I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get the help that I need. We get to the hospital, and I'm in the emergency room. That's always the first place you go anytime you hospitalize. You always end up in the emergency room. It's not like the movies where they find some person in the special place first, and it doesn't work that way. You always got to go through the emergency room. So I'm in the emergency room, and my doctor gets me. My parents came with me. I remember my mom being really upset, and she was actually angry at the doctor because I remember she didn't like the way the doctor spoke with her, which I thought was kind of strange at the time. And so basically, the doctor convinced me. She's like, "Look, you have to go in to hospital." So I asked her, I was like, "Well, what is it like?" I'm like, "Is it?" She's like, "It's just a room." I'm asking all these crazy questions because you start to think all the stigma and the stereotypes of what happens in a mental hospital. And my lord, I was correct. So she basically, hospitalized me. They walked me to the the wing that I was going to be in, and I will never forget this. They took my shoelaces, they took my belt, everything that you could kill yourself with or make a weapon out of. And I always thought it was ironic because I was wearing my glasses, and I thought, well, you could hurt yourself with your glasses. All you need to do is take them apart. And it was weird, but they didn't take those. So they took my shoelaces and my belt. It's 3 o'clock in the morning now, 3:30 in the morning. I open the door. Everyone is sleeping. It's this dirty green walls in the hallway with this odd smell. Couldn't even describe it if I tried. And it's very, it's dark, but there's a little light so you can see. And I'm slowly walking towards the end of this hallway where there are these two extremely large men. They're huge. Um, they're basically, you don't want to mess with these guys. And there was a woman there, as a large woman as well. I think it was a large woman and a large man. And the woman offered me something to drink, like water or orange juice. I said, "Yeah, sure, thank you very much," because I was dying of thirst. So I took it, and I didn't know where to throw it away. So I just, without thinking, I just put it back on the table that was in front of me, where the two big people were sitting. And the woman just snapped at me. She's like, "Do not put it on the table. I'm not your mother. You throw that away." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I felt really embarrassed. I was like, "Oh my God." So I took the cup, I threw it out, and they took me into this one room, and this very sweet nurse asked me every possible question, anything personal you could possibly imagine. She asked me. She asked me if I knew what sex was, if I had sex, when the last time I had sex was, if I had any STDs, who my last partner. It was very strange. So I answered everything she asked me. I didn't have a problem, you know. I even told her with what I tried to make a suicide attempt with, because I did make a suicide attempt that night before my doctor called. It was a weak suicide attempt. It was actually an embarrassing one. She's like, "Oh, sweetie," she's like, "you'll just fall asleep with that dosage." She's like, "You won't do anything to yourself." So I'm not gonna say what it was, but I did pop more pills than I should have, and it turns out the amount I pilled was basically like a dosage for someone who needs stronger. It was nothing. It was so embarrassing. So they basically like, "Okay, we're gonna get you a room now after you do all the paperwork." And the room, it was a nightmare because there were more men in the clinic than there were women. So they had to triple up the rooms. So they stick me in the room with this Indian guy and this kind of hippie guy. The hippie guy was kind of cool. The Indian guy was out of his mind. Um, they put the cot right in front of his feet, and they're like, "All right, you'll sleep here tonight." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" I'm like, "Is this gonna be permanent?" They're like, "No, no, it's temporary. We just don't have enough room." So I try to fall asleep. I think I maybe slept for 20 minutes. I open my eyes, and instead of feet in front of my face, it's now this Indian guy staring at me. He's watching me sleep. So I'm a little startled, and I just kind of look at him and I say, "Hey, how you doing?" And he responds by mumbling. He goes, he goes, and then he goes, are you feeling bad for me?" I said, "I'm sorry? Are you feeling sorry for me?" I said, "No." I said, "I was just wondering how you were. It's a question." I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, and he mumbles a little bit more. And he's trying to figure out what I'm asking him. He's trying to dissect it. And he does this by like mumbling a little bit first and then saying something. So finally, um, the conversation ends. It got really strange. He started talking about the children and how the children tell him things in his ears, and he saw it through a movie, and their voices tell him what to do. It was, again, it was a cinematic moment. I couldn't believe it was happening, but this is what he told me. So I spoke to him for as much as I could. When I got out of bed, it turns out I missed breakfast. I must have slept through breakfast for that 20 minutes or whatever. So there was another big guy standing, who was taking care of and watching everybody. And I asked for breakfast, and he's like, "Well, where were you?" I said, "Hey, I'm new here." I was like, "I don't know what's going on." So they saved me a plate, and it was awful. It was grits, which I'd never had before in my life, orange juice, a boiled egg, and I think some cereal. Um, but it was just disgusting because first I hate eggs and grits are disgusting. So I basically spent the day there. I'm there now. and I'm kind of wandering around. I'm meeting people, and for the most part, the people that were meeting were nice. They were all suffering as I was, and the only problem was when they put you in a hospital, a state hospital. They they mix the patients up. So in other words, you could be spending the night with someone who is completely psychotic, and your only problem is like depression, but this guy, he wants to kill someone, or he talks to walls or stuff like that. So they don't mix people up properly according to diagnosis. They just kind of just throw them all in there together like it's a giant blender. So, I'm in the room with this Indian guy who I didn't really know what his problem or diagnosis was. The hippie guy, I think, was dealing with paranoia issues, and he was kind of nice, though. He was kind of cool. But the problem was, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, and I'm not this is not a racist thing. It's just what happened. The Indian guy basically stunk up the room. He smelled really bad. He refused to take a shower. And I had requested, I was like, look, I said to one of the people that worked there, I'm like, is there any way you can get this guy to shower? He stinks. I'm like, you can't go in there. And one guy gave me this spray um, to use in the room, and I would just keep spraying the room because the guy would just sleep all day. So when he was sleeping, I'd go in there and just spray around it. But it finally had gotten to the point after, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. I said once again, I'm like, is there any way you could get this guy to take a shower? And the dude kind of looked at me and he kind of smiled and he nodded his head and he literally grabbed the guy and had him stripped naked in the bathroom and he had him shower. Um, did it help? Not really, but at least it settled things. So, I was in the hospital for quite some time. It was probably, I don't know, it felt like it was almost a month. It was there. I was there for a while. Maybe it was 2.5 weeks. I don't remember. But I eventually started developing friendships with people, and we had formed a bond. There was 4 or 5 of us, and we called ourselves the Breakfast Club. And what we would do is we would meet in this room that the hospital kept closing off the areas that that they were allowed patients to like listen to music. It was called the music room. Now the music room was basically this old beat up stereo, from like 1927 with like a tape deck. It was just, or from the 80s or something, and this is like the 90s. So the thing was falling apart. And I remember I'd asked my friend at the time if she could make me a copy of the Peter Gabriel Us album on cassette so I could listen to it, and she did. And there's a reason that I'm going into that later. Um, so anyway, the Breakfast Club would meet in the music room, and we would just talk, and it would be amazing. We really did some great therapy on ourselves. Now the problem was the staff did not like the Breakfast Club. They didn't want us together. They didn't want us talking because you're not supposed to talk about your problems with other patients because of reasons. One of the reasons is known as the contagion effect. Now, the contagion effect is basically when you take one person and in a room, and that one person says, "Hey, I'm not feeling very well. I have a cold," and that person will say, "You know what? I think I have a bit of a cough too." Now, this person's in a room with 7 people. Another person will more than likely respond saying, "You know what? I kind of feel the same way." Basically making it contagion, and it's almost like a psychosomatic thing. And like the problem the other guy having isn't really real. It's just, you know, one of those things. That's one reason. There's also other reasons as well. They don't think you could do your own therapy, and they think it's dangerous, and you shouldn't do that. But in all honesty, it was helping us wonderfully. And while I was there, I was also starting to write a book. I had this brown book that my father brought me, and I was just writing in it constantly. I had two books actually with me that I was just constantly writing and making observations, just putting my thoughts down. I was like, I'm going to write a book about this experience. I was calling that book In My Box, and really just writing my heart out. At one point, they had closed the music room and they weren't allowing us in there. So I had written to the staff and I said, "Look, you can't keep doing this to us." What had allegedly happened was some one of the other patients had sexual relations with a nurse, allegedly, in this music room, and they were afraid that they were going to bring somebody in there, so they kept locking it up and watching us or whatever. So they just kept making it harder, and then they kept asking us questions. They wanted to know what was going on. There became like a little love triangle. I developed a crush on this girl, and this other guy had a crush on this girl, and he got the girl, and it's just all this silly stuff. But you know, it worked because it happened. We were just just going through our thing. Um,